So, time then for the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. And tonight we'll check out those headlines with journalist and author Christina Patterson and columnist at The Article, Ali Miraj. Evening to both of you. We'll chat in a second. First of all, let's check out those front pages for you. Starting with the Sunday Express, the Energy Secretary promises that we won't run out of gas this winter and that prices will remain capped. The Observer leads with news of a shortage of nurses hitting the NHS, a crisis, it says, is being made worse by a drop in recruits from the rest of Europe. The Mirror says the Prime Minister has gone on holiday to Marbella while the country faces a cost of living crisis. On the front of the Telegraph, Boris Johnson faces fresh Brexit clash with Parliament and the courts as he calls for a new deal with the EU over Northern Ireland. Here's your Mail reporting that a work-from-home culture in Whitehall meant that documents about UK citizens trying to escape from the Taliban in Afghanistan were missed. The Sunday Times says Scotland Yard has spoken to the American woman who alleges she was sexually assaulted by Prince Andrew. The Prince has always strongly denied her claims. And The People has a story about wildlife campaigner Chris Packham, who says his car was set alight. And you saw them a moment ago. Christina Patterson and Ali Miraj are both with us this evening. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. And let's crack on, shall we? Christina, why don't you kick things off? The Sunday Express taking quite a positive stance. We will keep you warm during winter, according to the Energy Secretary. I'm not sure everyone is quite as confident as the Express seems to be.
Well, I think we can generally bank on the Express to be pretty confident and upbeat when it comes to supporting the government and the Prime Minister on every single issue. I'm sure if it could, it would say there is no pandemic, everything's absolutely fine, there is no shortage of petrol. But all of these things are not true. There is still a pandemic, even though the government barely mentioned it during their conference this week. There are still shortages of petrol. And more importantly, to shortages of workers, of hauliers, of staff in all kinds of areas, including, sadly, people to work in slaughterhouses, so that 150,000 pigs are going to be slaughtered and incinerated because we don't have the staff. And apparently Boris Johnson doesn't care about that. And nor, perhaps more surprisingly, his wife, Carrie, who is normally very keen on animal rights, doesn't seem to have made any comment on this. But the huge issue facing us is on energy prices. And Martin Lewis has been saying this week, along with others, that prices are likely to go up to £2,000 next year. That is a massive, massive rise. It may be fine if you are on a government minister's salary and if you can go off on luxury mini breaks to Marbella. But for most people in this country, a £2,000 energy bill is going to make a really significant difference to their disposable income. So it's pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, Martin is the money-saving expert, of course. Ali, a lot of accusations thrown at the government there. I mean, is there a case that the government's been caught out here? It was obvious, wasn't it, that there'd be a surge in demand for energy after the peak of the pandemic, and yet there doesn't seem to have been a great deal of planning for one.
Well, Jonathan, I think the whole world's been caught out to a certain degree because we have been in a pandemic for the last 18 months and the world economy is reawakening and there's a huge amount of demand globally. So you're seeing, when it comes to energy prices, gas being bought up quite aggressively by Chinese state-owned energy firms. You also see the Russians using leverage to restrict the gas supply to get its Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is coming in from the Baltic landing in Germany, and want to get it signed off by German regulators in short order. So it is restricting gas supplies. And then you have other supplies from Qatar and other places being diverted to Asia. So that's basically the problem. I mean, look, you can argue that structurally the UK should have been better prepared going back many years for this. Our gas storage facilities are some of the lowest in Europe. We didn't really focus on nuclear being part of the energy mix to the extent that we should have. Now there's talks about a new nuclear plant being built. I think EDF's being lined up for that one, and various other smaller reactors as well. But we're in this situation right now. It is a very difficult one. 12 energy companies have already gone to the wall. It looks like the business secretary Kwasi Kwarteng at the moment saying everything will be all right on the night, but I don't think that's really going to wash. And I think the biggest issue right now is whether the regulator Ofgem is going to review the energy price cap more than twice a year, because energy companies feel that they need to raise prices. I mean, this whole issue about the energy price cap was to protect consumers, but we are in an extraordinary situation here at the moment. And unfortunately, energy suppliers need to feel that they can earn a decent buck, otherwise they're going to go bust.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that next then with Christina, front of the Sunday Times. Factories days from closure. I mean, there are two issues here, aren't there, really? Small businesses don't have a cap like households do, but also suppliers are saying that the price cap in its current form is too damaging for them. I mean, it is a real issue.
Well, when Boris Johnson famously said that he wanted to F a word I won't use, business, he clearly absolutely meant it, because this government is doing absolutely everything it can to ensure that business is having a very, very difficult time. It cuts off its supply of workers without bothering to do anything to set any alternative in place. As Ali says, the rise in energy prices not just limited to this country, and good old Vladimir Putin is playing a role in this as well, as is President Xi Jinping. I mean, it's a kind of perfect opportunity for some of the world's bad guys to really do their stuff and squeeze the world, and it's working very effectively. But as Ali also said, we don't have, we only have, I can't even remember the figure, but a really, really small amount. I mean, something like a week's amount. It's probably not as little as a week's supply is sort of saved up. But in other countries in Europe, they will have months and months of spare supply. So I think this is making life really difficult. Farmers are having an absolute nightmare, and energy companies. The government seems to be perfectly happy for companies to go bust, for workers to lose their jobs, and even the prospect of factories having to close down because they literally.
Well, I don't think they're happy about it. And to be fair, Kwasi Kwarteng has been speaking to business leaders in the last couple of days, and we'll be putting a lot of this to him tomorrow when he's interviewed by Trevor Phillips.
Well, all business people have been coming out of those meetings in despair, saying that government is doing nothing. But sorry, over to you, Ali, on this.
Well, look, just to pick up some of Christina's points, even some of the Tories' biggest backers and Brexit backers, including Lord Wolfson, the CEO of Next, have been coming out and saying that the government's essentially being quite tin-eared on these matters, particularly staff shortages as well. And the fact that we had this sort of new economic model rolled out at the Conservative Party conference this week, with Boris Johnson now sprawling across the centre ground of British politics like a blonde-haired sumo wrestler. But the issue here is that businesses are facing serious problems, not only with staff shortages, but also energy costs are going up. There are shortages. That is a problem. We also don't have enough electricity interconnectors with other parts of Europe to actually sort of deal with our supply chains. I mean, I know that there's a new one that's being looked at with between the UK and Ireland, Greenlink, another one with Germany called Neu Connect, but they're years away from completion. And this is a real structural issue that should have been looked at years ago. And we're in a problem now where there is a peak in demand. We're also looking at inflationary pressures in the economy, with the Bank of England saying that inflation could go up to 4%. And the spectre of all of this, Jonathan, is interest rates. I mean, Rishi Sunak is very, very attuned to this. He knows that he's got 2 trillion of public debt, 400 billion of borrowing on the coronavirus pandemic. A 1% increase in interest rates could be leading to billions in debt servicing for the government. So it's a serious issue, even for the government and for all of us.
OK, and just finally, literally a sentence from each of you on the front of the Sunday Mirror. What cost living crisis? The Prime Minister apparently has gone to Marbella for a break. Ali, is that fair enough? Can he have a holiday after the Tory party conference?
Well, look, I mean, he's master of all he surveys. And yes, the Prime Minister is entitled to a break. However, as Dominic Raab can tell him, there's a time and a place. And as Dominic Raab was on holiday, as the dominoes fell with the Taliban taking town after town, and he effectively lost his job, the Prime Minister should be mindful of that.
Christina, very quickly.
They've been drinking champagne all week. They've been singing karaoke songs as they cut the £20 uplift universal credit. They've been having a lovely, lovely time as people watch their incomes being shrunk. So I'm sure that looming inflation and a cost of living crisis and the problems that this country will face over the next few months clearly don't bother any of them. But it would be nice if they showed a tiny, tiny bit of empathy for the so-called ordinary people of this country, but they're clearly not going to.
We want to squeeze a couple of stories in. Christina, let's start with the Sunday Telegraph and another Brexit story. It's been a bit quiet recently, but it's back on the front pages. Tell us about this.
Well, because we haven't entirely yet shredded our international reputation, they were doing a very good job of it by breaking pretty much every agreement we make. We've managed to really irritate France recently. Germany have said we're no longer trustworthy. The AUKUS deal has done a huge amount of damage. And now good old Lord Frost, good old belligerent pompous Lord Frost is now doing his kind of Brexit is marvellous and we had nothing to do with this deal we signed and it's absolutely crazy deal and ridiculous and whoever thought it might work, so now we're going to break it. And Boris Johnson, who loves this kind of aggressive testosterone, well, there is a technical term which is not really polite enough for me to use on television, so I won't, but let's just say it involves waving a part of the male anatomy in a rather aggressive way. He loves it and he is very happy to see this go to courts because he so enjoyed proroguing Parliament and all that stuff that he wants to do it all over again because he clearly thinks he is king of all he surveyed and he just wants to, you know, show yet again that he's king of the law, he's king of Europe, he's king of everything.
Yeah, Ali, let me get Ali's thoughts on this, Christina. Yeah, another clash in the courts and the House of Lords on the cards.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is all to do with the Northern Ireland Protocol with a hard border in the Irish Sea and the fact that Northern Ireland is in the single market, the EU single market for goods. And the point is that this is not really working for GB and Northern Ireland because there are checks going in. This is causing problems. It's causing problems in terms of the DUP. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, the head of the DUP, is threatening to walk out of Stormont. And Lord Frost this week at the Tory party conference on the Fringe was very, very direct and very belligerent, saying that, yes, Article 16 could be invoked, which means that unilateral action will be taken and the UK will basically pull out of the protocol. And you also got Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor from the US, saying that this is going to cause serious problems for stability between Northern Ireland and the rest of Ireland. So, and we know that this is very close to Biden's heart. So a real issue. The positive thing is Maroš Šefčovič, the Vice President of the EU Commission, is going to come out with new proposals this week, which are apparently meant to be meaningful. So let's see.
All right, and just finally, I guess not unrelated actually, in the sense that that Brexit forms part of this. Front of the Observer, Christina, a nursing crisis. We just simply can't get enough nurses.
No, and this is a really, really serious issue, actually. 10 years ago, I did a big campaign in The Independent about nursing because I had unfortunately very bad experiences of nursing, even when there were plenty of nurses around. That is not the situation now. I mean, you know, most nurses are wonderful at their jobs, that they've had 18 months of working in absolutely impossible conditions, and they've had the workforce decimated by Brexit. We read that many nurses from the EU actually received abuse after the Brexit vote, and not surprisingly, very few have now applied to work here. So now we're trying to poach nurses from places in the world where they are very much needed, like India and the Philippines. And as always, we create this huge problem, blame everyone else when it happens, and the net result is an absolutely exhausted workforce and less safe care for people in hospital.
Yeah, we've got 40,000. Sorry, Christine. I'm going to go to Ali because we've only got 30 seconds left. Very briefly, Ali, 40,000 vacancies.
40,000 vacancies and 5 million people on the waiting list. And Christina mentions some of the numbers. Back in 2016, we had over 9,000 nurses from the European Economic Area. We're going to have under 1,000 left. So not a good position. Again, a structural problem that needs to be solved and quickly.